You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Real Talk Texas, and we've got the Real Estate Radio Network's CEO, Ron Quintero, and we've been talking about just mortgage strategies and how that fits into your whole financial picture as you're either buying your first home or if you're refinancing your current home and getting ready for retirement. So we've covered a little bit of that, and so we'd like to just add a little bit more on strategy. Ron, what are you seeing more? Let's talk about someone that's maybe, we've talked about the first-time buyer. We've talked about at the end of the road. What do you think if you're in your 40s, maybe you're on your second home, what would you say a good strategy would be there?
You know, my wife and I just went through a huge change. My son's going to school in Berkeley. He's in his senior year college. My daughter's going to school in Northridge, and we became empty nesters 2 years ago. You know, it's not always about moving up. Sometimes it's about moving down. Sometimes it's about scaling back a little bit, you know, and really you got to look at your life and try to think about not just where you're at, but where you're going to be. And my wife and I, you know, we had a big 4,600 square foot single story ranch in Southern California, which is a pretty big property. And, you know, two and a half years ago, we looked at each other and said, this is crazy. Why are we hanging on to this big old home? We lived in Orange County, California at the time. I was born and raised here in San Diego. And so, you know, I just told her, I said, you know, I don't want to chase you around a 4,600 square foot house. I want to be able to, you know, shrink my environment a little bit so I don't have to work so hard. And she started laughing at me. We have two little beagles. And I said, you know what? I've always wanted to, you know, have an ocean view. And, you know, that's going to be a tough deal there in Texas, in Dallas. But,
yeah, we don't really have any ocean here.
No, you don't. But, you know, it was something that I've always wanted. I've always wanted a property with a nice ocean view. So we started coming down to San Diego, which is about 75 miles away from where we lived at the time. And we spent our weekends down there kind of shopping around, poking around, and so forth. And we were looking at, again, homes, just traditional thinking. And then finally, you know, we were in downtown, and I said, let's just go ahead and check out a high-rise condo. And, Steve, I know that you and Dana both have been to my condo, and we spent time here together.
Yeah, you're living my dream, Ron.
You know, and we ended up, you know, my wife at first says, well, how will the dogs do in the condo? And, again, they're beagles. And I said, they're going to be just fine. So what I started to do, Steve, I think you'll like the story, is I would make a reservation with the hotel in downtown. We'd come down here, and I'd always tell them, give me the highest floor possible. Not necessarily the room with the biggest bed or not the softest bed or the suite or something like that. I said, I just need a high-up floor so she could get acclimated towards this idea or this concept of high-rise living. And so there's a hotel down here in San Diego. It's called Indigo Hotel, and they're dog-friendly. So I ended up reserving rooms there, and after 2 or 3 trips by ourselves, I said, why don't we bring the dogs this time? She looked at me, she says, well, can we do that? I said, yeah, I've already prearranged it. And it was the first time that she was in downtown San Diego that she took our dogs out for a walk while I conducted a couple of meetings. And I came back, and I said, how's it going? She goes, I think we could do this downtown thing. I said, well, tell me why, you know, the big change of heart. She goes, I took the dogs out for a walk. They absolutely loved it. We bumped into other dogs. They're all sniffing each other out. And she goes, it was a lot of fun. So as I speak to you now, I'm on the 21st floor of a high-rise condo overlooking Coronado and Point Loma and the entire San Diego Harbor. I've got my ocean view. So I think more important than just buying real estate, try to anticipate where you want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. If you're growing your family, as an example, if you're a young couple and you think you're going to have more kids, you know, buy the home with the extra bedroom and use it as an office until you need to turn it into a nursery. You know, buy a home if you're a home office-based executive that, you know, from time to time you don't have to go into the office and you want to work out of the property, your home. Buy with a 4-bedroom instead of 3 if you only need a 3-bedroom, and that way you could use the extra room for whatever you need to use it for, a home office or for a hobby room or something like that. And a lot of people really don't concentrate on what their true needs are in the real estate that they own, and more importantly, not just their needs today, but trying to anticipate what their needs are going to be 3, 5, and 7 years from today.
Well, Ron, what is the average time that somebody stays in a home? And isn't it somewhere around 5 years?
You know, what's funny about that is it's longer in Texas than it is here. In Texas, it's just over 5 years. Here, it's actually just barely over 3 years. In Southern California, our turnover rate is much more higher. I mean, we're way higher than the Republic of Texas. You guys just are a little bit more conservative. And the other thing about, what's going on with Texas right now is your economy is completely disconnected from the rest of the economy. You guys are having growth right now in employment. You do not have the same unemployment rate as the rest of the country. You do have businesses that are relocating to your state because your state is more friendly towards businesses. There's a lot of good things going on, in the Republic of Texas right now. I always like to call it the Republic of Texas just because you guys kind of do your own thing. As an example, we talked a little bit earlier about the 80% rule, not being able to extract more than 80% of your equity when refinancing. There's a lot of the states that would have benefited from that. They wouldn't be in the pickle that they're in if, in fact, they had some of the conservative laws on the books that you guys there in Texas have. And I remember there were some mortgage people and even some consumers that would complain back in 2004, 5, 6, and 7 before the mortgage meltdown, before the wheels came off and everything got kind of wobbly there. People would complain, why is it so restrictive here in Texas? Well, you know what? Looking in the rearview mirror, I think more of our country should have had some of the rules and regulations that you folks have to live with there in Texas.
Well, yeah, we do things a little different here and a little more conservative, but it has paid off for the people of Texas. And it's funny you were talking about what's happening in Dallas or in Texas, especially in Dallas-Fort Worth. If you live here, you'll notice that there's a ton of construction that's going on, and that just does nothing but get me excited because I know that it may be a little difficult to get around right now, but I've been to many industry conferences, and the most recent one I went to talked about the Metroplex here being somewhere just south of 7 million people. And what we're doing here and why we're having all this road construction and all this, and builders are starting to build again, is they're preparing for 2013 when we feel we'll have over 12 million people just in the Metroplex here in Dallas-Fort Worth. And what's happening there is, I'm with you. I've had a house in Colleyville, and the kids are grown and gone and all that, and I keep trying to drag my wife downtown Dallas because there's some great condos down there, and we do loans on those all the time, so I get to see them. And I just, I said, I've always wanted to have a doorman, someone to say, hey, good morning, Mr. Hakes. Here's your coffee and here's your car, So, when I went to your place in San Diego, I was just so jealous, and you have a beautiful view off your balcony there. It's just really great. We only have a couple minutes left.
Steve, it's not that sexy. It's not that sexy, but I'll tell you what, it is nice not having a gardener. It is nice not having a pool guy. It is nice not having to go out and pull weeds and maintain, a bunch of stuff that you don't necessarily want to be maintaining. I mean, let me tell you how crazy I got over here. My main mode of transportation now is a bicycle. I don't even own a car. If I need to drive to Los Angeles, I'll walk across the street to the Marriott and rent a car from Hertz for the day. I don't have any maintenance costs, no insurance costs, no gasoline costs. I don't have a car payment, none of that fun stuff anymore. So, yeah, high-rise living, like what you were just talking about there in Dallas, it is fun, and it's nice to be able to experience a change of life. But that, again, it's not about me. It's about you, the listener. And the advice that we're trying to give you right now is to try to anticipate your future lifestyle, not just necessarily your immediate needs of the day, but what path are you on in life and where are you headed, and make decisions based upon that information, Steve.
That's right. Dana, I hope you're listening. Yeah, we've got our office there for Affiliated Bank right down in Uptown on McKinney Avenue, and so we're starting to get a feel for what the in-city life is like versus living out in the suburbs. And at 53 years old and being married for 30 years, it's kind of nice. I work with my wife Dana, and we walk for lunch, and there's some great places on McKinney Avenue that we frequent, and it's just we're starting to get a feel for that. I haven't got her to move downtown yet, Ron, but I'm working her.
Well, I think she's nested in the old place. She's probably got that place so personalized around how your kids grew up and how you guys built 30 years of relationship together. And I love hearing that because my wife and I have been together for 30 years, married for 27, together for 30. And that just says something about an individual. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm actually complimenting you, because anybody that has a relationship in a culture where divorce is becoming more and more common, it's grown every year for the past 20 years in terms of, except for this past year, it actually slowed down a little bit. But from what I understand, a lot of people ended up getting separated because they couldn't afford to get a divorce. And they just decided to stay married, and they'll take care of the paperwork later on. But, you're a relationship guy, I'm a relationship guy, and not only does that carry over from our personal life, but also in our business life. We both enjoy long-term relationships with not only our friends and family members, but I end up, you're a customer of mine first. I hate to say that, but that's how we started working together. But it's developed into a friendship, and I know that you do the same thing in your business as well.
That's exactly right. I think it just comes down to that. And if you're listening, we're going to go to a break. But when we come back, Ron, I'd like to talk to you about the Real Estate Radio Network. And Ron Quintero here, he's the CEO and founder of Real Estate Radio Network. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the structure of our show. And Real Talk Texas is affiliated of the Real Estate Radio Network. And we're going to talk about what to expect out of this show for